I've recently been given the job title non-essential worker. Before that, I might have introduced myself as any one of the following: photographer, director, producer, inventor, business owner, all skills I've worked hard to develop. But this whole lockdown thing has reminded me of one of my most familiar skills. I'm a procrastinator. I'm not particularly proud of it, but it's something I've just learned to live with. For me, the last couple of months have been a procrastinator's paradise. I've started all kinds of projects. None of them had deadlines. I didn't think it would be fair today to talk about such an important subject, not procrastination, but shaping our future, without mentioning what my high school counselor once told me. Mr. Delzell, you're showing signs of being a procrastinator. If you would only apply yourself, you might actually make something of yourself. Naturally, I pushed back a little, and then he came back with the following. Okay, you might be a high-functioning procrastinator. I remember thanking him and thinking, high-functioning, that part sounded pretty good. It's kind of a compliment. So how, you might ask, does a guy with a deadline-intensive job ever get anything done? Adaptation. My formula to success is simple. Take the skills, even the ones that are not commonly thought to be skills, and adapt them to work in your favor. We'll go into that more later, I promise. So, how did I become a photographer? I first picked up a camera about the same time as I had a newspaper route. My 20-something-year-old daughter reminded me nobody's going to know what a newspaper route is. So here's a quick description. Imagine a truck dropping off a stack of papers every morning. I'd grab them, fold them, stick them in a canvas bag that hung from my bicycle handlebars. I'd ride around the neighborhood as the sun was coming up and throw them as close to their porches as I could. I think I was about 12 years old. Looking back, I think I was pretty lucky to be doing both things at the same time, because I realized that having two solid skills meant I had choices. When I started to earn a few bucks making pictures, I always say making pictures because I think there's a difference between making pictures and taking pictures. So I started making pictures and selling them. I thought I could be doing something I love, or I could keep getting up at 5 a.m. every morning and get chased by angry dogs. As luck would have it, one of those dogs actually did catch me. I took a tumble, broke my arm, and suddenly I was now a full-time one-arm photographer. I never looked back. So the point here is I've learned to adapt my skills to each job I've ever had by bringing my accumulated experience to each new assignment. That brings me to a concept that's out there that's been gaining some traction lately. It describes the range of your experiences, what I call skills in the making, as the reason why a generalist, that's a person with lots of skills in lots of areas, will win in a world that's growing more and more specialized. It's kind of an alternative to the idea that you need 10,000 hours of practice to be really good at something. My spin on that is both approaches are useful. In my own professional life, I've worked with thousands of clients over the years. It turns out my bookkeeper actually knew the exact number and once told me I had passed 27,500 customer experiences. I think I asked her to stop counting. I'm not sure why, but I just didn't want to know. And looking back, I think that reminded me of 27,500 stressed out, anxiety-filled experiences. That's kind of the dark secret of being a procrastinator. It brings on stress. So it occurred to me later that it was the combined experience of all those skills throughout my lifetime that led me to become an inventor. A big portion of all those jobs came from my studio rental business, Blue Sky Rental Studios. It was San Francisco's busiest studio. We had 7 daylight studios, each a specialized venue designed for image makers. It was a destination for many of the world's leading photographers and filmmakers. It gave me a front row seat to some of the best work of our time, from celebrities to rock stars, founders, business leaders, from many of Silicon Valley's most innovative businesses. I started to see patterns that were far more similar than different in the way that people were working and approached their work. So I decided to build this thing I call the light grid. I did it to simplify the otherwise complicated, time-consuming process of making pictures and videos. Light grid automates a big part of photography and video production using software and robotics. You can simply touch a picture in our library of images and in seconds move the lights into position. The camera settings all change, and anyone can make pictures and videos that look like you've been a pro for a lifetime. You can put your attention on what's really important, and that's what's happening in front of the camera. And who doesn't want to be a director? That's a skill I recommend every image maker develop. You can use those skills in every job you will ever have. You can also access the studio remotely and work from anywhere in the world on our collaborative platform, directing talent with teams from anywhere. I'd like to say I built it because I saw this whole work from home thing coming, but I think it was really more about conserving resources and creating access for businesses of any size. Without that wide range of experience, it's unlikely that I would have ever thought to build it. Along the way, Chris Anderson, the curator of the TED conference, learned about my new invention. He liked the idea of democratizing media, and he asked me to bring it to the TED conference in Los Angeles. I was told it was the first product ever invited without a corporate sponsor. A little later, I learned what that really meant. I was paying for everything, but it was still a real honor to be a part of that amazing event. Since then, the Light Grid has helped launch some pretty amazing projects. Peak Design did its first Kickstarter project in the Light Grid, and that became Kickstarter's most successful business ever. An Oscar-nominated documentary, Racing Extinction, used a time-lapse sequence I worked on to simulate the impact that acid had on the ocean. That clip was shown the night of the Oscars to a global audience of close to 30 million people. That all sounds pretty good, right? Well, it turns out adaptation is not for everyone, whether it's adapting to new technologies or finding ways to develop skills. So when I was asked to speak at today's TEDx event, I jumped at the chance. I'm always looking to earn more early adopters. The invite came at the end of February, and within days I went from thinking I totally got this TEDx thing to I totally don't got this TEDx thing. The world as I knew it, at least, was changing fast. I began to think I didn't know quite as much as I used to, especially as it relates to the future. When the first date was postponed, I thought, okay, I've got more time. I can use that time to make sense of all the noise out there. But then just about everyone I knew in the creative service community was out of work, practically overnight. And the noise level in the media just kept getting louder. I needed a new approach. That's when I started to realize I've never really known what the future was going to look like. I think I'll just approach this like one of my commercial assignments. I started to think, I've got this again. I also decided I'd better do some research of my own. Research for me has always been a good way to expand my perspective and keep my focus. When I want firsthand advice, I always call a friend that's an expert. I rarely go online for that type of thing. My pal Jesse, who I've known since kindergarten, makes major motion pictures. The team he was on for Black Panther won an Academy Award for production design last year. And I thought, well, he'll have some insights. And sure enough, he did. He was literally 100% optimistic that the entertainment industry was going to recover. And he was the first voice that I'd heard that actually had a get back to work plan. I thought, great, that's something I can build on. I thought, I need a back to work plan too. And then another email dropped in my inbox. TEDx was postponed again. But this time I was recognizing an old pattern in my behavior. More time first triggers a genuinely optimistic sense of well-being, but I've learned that it's not really optimism I'm feeling. It's more the absence of reality, an artist's sanctuary. That's strictly my experience, by the way. I'm sure there's some type A artists out there somewhere. Almost instantly, my active mind began to spin with all the possibilities. I was back again. I totally got this, I'm thinking. There is a silver lining in the procrastinator's playbook. And I can almost hear you asking, so how did you find yourself in a business that's filled with high-intensity deadlines? Well, I learned early on that there was nothing more motivating than either a dog chasing me or the opportunity to do something I loved. And more importantly, deadlines turned out to be my greatest motivator. It was both a trigger for action and for me a gateway to creativity and solutions. And that, my friends, is my version of adaptation. You simply take the facts as they are, the good, the bad, and everything in between, and adapt them to your ever-changing reality. So here's a question for you. How can you use your own unique superpowers, and why not call them superpowers, to shape our future? In my experience, most people like to think of themselves as problem solvers. We know from experience that just about anything has the potential to become a problem. So it stands to reason that the future will always be full of uncertainty. It's how we approach it that will define us. So lately, I've decided to think of myself as a solution finder and skip right over that whole problems waiting to happen part. I find it much more effective to work that way. When you're a solution finder, you're always ready for the future. So let's get back to the media. Since the volume right now is set to an all-time high, how can we focus on effective solutions? I think you have to ask the question, who controls the volume in your life? If you leave it to content producers, it's going to stay loud. Here's a little insight into the media. The last mile. That's where content producers work their hardest to capture your attention. I like to call it the space between ideas and eyeballs. Right now, controlling the volume is an essential skill. So I've come up with a little system I call MILE. Think of it as self-defense for your brain. It stands for Media, Interactive Literacy, and Engagement. I know it's a mouthful, so I'll break it down for you. Media is the noise in your life, and no, your parents and teachers don't count. Interactive literacy, that's where you develop self-defense skills so you can master the art of volume control. Ask yourself, am I going to be a target my whole life, or am I going to develop the skills needed to control the volume? And then there's engagement. That's where you start to make some noise of your own. Because the more you take control and contribute to the conversation, the more we can count on you to help shape our future. I want to thank Jessica and the whole TEDx team for adapting this event to the changing times we are all experiencing, and for giving me a deadline. It makes me feel kind of essential, and for that I'm grateful.